In theaters now from Sony Pictures Classics is Becoming Led Zeppelin, a documentary starring Led Zeppelin about becoming Led Zeppelin. So I'm a big Zeppelin fan, so I was very excited about this documentary. I always get excited about a documentary that is a comprehensive look at an act that includes participation from the act if the act is still alive. So I got most of what I was looking for in this documentary. Up front, you need to know this is really only about the beginnings of Led Zeppelin up to the point of Led Zeppelin 2 coming out. Thus the title, Becoming Led Zeppelin. I'm really hoping there's going to be a sequel called Being Led Zeppelin because this was fabulous. So this is an IMAX only release as I record this. Eventually you'll be seeing this on streaming and on physical media, hopefully in other places. But it's an IMAX thing. And for me, it didn't really need to be an IMAX. Like the greatest benefit of this being an IMAX is the sound, because honestly, if you listen to Zeppelin, you don't want to hear Zeppelin quietly. And the sound was powerful in this. And just having those songs envelop you was pretty badass in the theater. Visually speaking, it didn't really lend itself to the IMAX format because most of the visuals were footage from a really long time ago, from not necessarily the best sources. There were a few vintage clips that came from original film elements that looked fantastic on the big screen, but really what you're talking about for the most part is 4:3 images that were shot, taken from TV broadcasts or shot on 16 millimeter, or just not shot really with the intention of showing it theatrically and being cropped just a little bit on the top and the bottom. There's a scene from, I want to say it was maybe European or German TV, black and white, early on for Zeppelin. I think they were being called Led Zeppelin at that point, not being billed as the Yardbirds, the new Yardbirds, where the camera is shot for TV. It's the full band, or you're seeing a two-shot of Page and Plant, and Page is playing guitar solo and Plant is looking on, and he's like cut off from the nose down. And I'm like, I think originally we would have seen his face. So it's one of those things where sometimes the cropping wasn't great. Sometimes taking old standard def video and blowing it up that huge wasn't that great. It's mostly the guys being interviewed now or recently. It's all the surviving members were involved. So you get extensive interviews with Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones. And apparently a never before heard interview with John Bonham, obviously from when he was still alive, that is sort of sprinkled throughout the film to give his perspective, which is great. And occasionally you will see shots of the surviving members hearing those audio clips being played as we hear them, and then just like smiling and thinking back warmly about their long lost bandmate who passed away many decades ago. It's very interesting to me that it gives me the part of the Zeppelin story I don't know. Like I read Hammer of the Gods years ago, which is a fabulous book, and there have been many books, maybe even better than that, written since then. But I never knew about their beginnings, which is what this is. So this film takes its time talking about each of the individual members and their lives and their development as musicians and where they gained status and the various gigs they had and who they played with, and the fact that it was a great sequence with Jimmy Page talking about playing guitar on the original session for Shirley Bassey recording Goldfinger and stuff like that. And you see some of the things these guys played on, which you would never think of a member of Led Zeppelin playing on some of this stuff. But Page and John Paul Jones were big time session musicians for the longest time. And hearing them talk about how it was becoming a guitarist, becoming a musician when their parents thought maybe they should be doing something more sensible, especially Robert Plant. And you can see with Plant, when even now, as an old guy, he's talking about this, and you see it still sort of, there's still a little bit of tenderness there, talking about how he sort of split from his family in order to pursue this dream that came true many, many times over. So cool original footage, cool original stills. Very interesting in hearing how these guys formed into who they were and how those four people came together and created Zeppelin, and how apparently it really gelled almost from the first time they flipped a switch and started playing together. And then you hear about the touring and the deals that were being made and how they recorded their albums. I'm not going to give it away if you don't know the story, but it's a blast in the theater. It's fascinating. The music obviously is really good. And the only regret, it runs 2 hours. The only regret is that it doesn't tell the whole story. And I didn't really know that going in. I mean, you know, the title Becoming Led Zeppelin, that kind of tells you that it's not the whole story, but you're just enjoying it so much, and you're like, man, I can't wait to hear about Led Zeppelin 4. I can't wait to hear about Physical Graffiti, and I can't wait to hear about, how it all ended. And you realize this would be a 40-hour film if they really went into detail about everything. So my hope is that they maybe, since they had all the guys, maybe they did get a comprehensive interview about the Zeppelin story. Maybe the guys were only willing to sit down for the amount of time it took to tell this part of the story. I don't know, but I would love for at least one more of these films that are this amount of quality and this amount of depth to tell the story of Led Zeppelin in their own words, because this was really pretty fabulous. So if you can see this in a theater, I highly recommend it. A lot of people have great sound systems at home, and that's fine, but there's nothing quite like sitting there with a huge screen in front of you and just feeling the bass and drums of these songs. So in theaters now, only in IMAX, is Becoming Led Zeppelin.